Ruth chapter 3 in the NIV. One day Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you'll be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you're there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant, Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized, and he said, "No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today."
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Pastor Grayson, and I am glad that you're here. We are continuing in our third week going through the book of Ruth. In the book of Ruth, one of the themes that you see is the story of Ruth is a story of hope. And as I was thinking about hope and as I was preparing for this message, I sort of stumbled on a story that really, I think for me, crystallized the way that we think of hope in our day and age. So I don't know if any of you heard about the founding of FedEx or how that got started, but FedEx sort of has become kind of a part of our vernacular, like Microsoft or Amazon. But like with any company, it started, it was a startup, a small business startup back in 1971. It was started by a man named Fred Smith. And Fred had this idea in college, and he thought about how he could improve the way that companies shipped packages. And he thought, well, there's a quicker way that we could do this. And so I think he was at Yale or Harvard or somewhere, but he wrote a paper on this, and his professor gave him the letter grade C for his idea. But he believed in it. And so a few years later, after he graduated, he decided to put his idea into practice, and he started FedEx. Well, he was able to get a few people to come on board and support him during this and invest in his business. But as with a lot of businesses, the first few years were really rocky. And it wasn't long before Fred realized that the company was almost out of money, and he couldn't get any investors. And so he had to think about, what am I supposed to do? So he went out, and he had a meeting, and it flopped. And so he was on his way back from this meeting, and he had $5,000 left in the bank. And he knew that Las Vegas was just a few miles away from him. So he decided to take a detour, and he went to Las Vegas. And this is a true story. He took his last $5,000 that the company had, and he bet it on a few hands of blackjack. Talk about a wish and a prayer. But luckily for him, it worked out, and he was able to turn that $5,000 into $27,000, which allowed him to keep the company open just long enough that he could get some additional investors and they could turn the company around, and now FedEx is the giant that it is today. But looking back, Fred will admit, he's still alive, and he says that gambling your money away to keep your business open is really not a very good or effective way to run your business. But every now and again, a crazy idea like that actually works. Well, the reason why I bring that up in part is because in chapter 3 of Ruth, we see that Ruth and Naomi make an incredible gamble. They do this, frankly, as we're reading the story, it's kind of weird. This plan that they concoct in the first few verses of chapter 1. And we see them make this incredible gamble, but I want to submit to you that the gamble they make is very different in kind from the gamble that Fred made. So just stick with me and I'll explain to you what I mean. But just as a quick recap, if you're a little bit fuzzy on what we've covered, the first couple of chapters of Ruth tells the story of really mainly of two people, Ruth and her mother-in-law, Naomi. Naomi moved out to the land of Moab, which is about 75 miles away from Israel. She moved out there with her husband and two sons. Her two sons marry a couple of Moabite women, but then tragedy strikes and both Naomi's husband and Ruth's husband die. Well, as Naomi decides to come back to Israel, specifically to the town of Bethlehem, she tells her daughters-in-law, you don't want to come with me. It's better for you to stay here. I'm an old widow. I'm going to be poor and destitute the rest of my life. You have a chance at a better life. Well, one of the daughter-in-laws listens to her and goes back to the land of Moab, but Ruth commits herself to her. And sort of in her famous commitment speech, she says, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And she puts her hope in the God of Naomi. Well, sure enough, they come back, and we looked at in chapter 2 last week how Ruth had a chance encounter with a man named Boaz, who was an honorable, God-fearing man, and who provided for Ruth and Naomi. And now in chapter 3, Naomi, this is probably about 6 months after Ruth's husband's death is what scholars think. So there's been a period of time where sort of informally Ruth has kind of courted Boaz and vice versa, sort of like in high school when it's like, are you dating or not dating? It's like we're just friends, right? It's sort of what it was. But now Naomi sees the writing on the wall and she sees a chance for her daughter-in-law to have a better life. And so she concocts this plan, and we see it first start to take form here in verse 1 of chapter 3. And again, as we start talking about hope, I want you to see two things this morning. Again, that the hope for Ruth and Naomi is very different than the hope that we see with Fred, or really about very different from the hope that we talk about in our day-to-day life. And so really the two things we're going to focus on this morning is what hope actually is. What is a biblical understanding of hope? And secondly, what hope does for us. All right, so first, let's go back and start in chapter 3, looking again at verses 1 through 4. So Naomi speaking says, my daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be provided for. Her heart is for Ruth. Naomi is not thinking selfishly at this point. She's like, look, you don't have to have the same life that I am destined to have, or at least so Naomi thinks. So I must find a home for you where you'll be provided for. Now, Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours, which we've touched on before and we'll touch on again. She says, tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. So wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let him know you're there until he has finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, note the place where he is lying. And then go uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. If you're reading that and you think, man, this sounds really weird, you are not alone. And in fact, it's not just weird for us as modern readers. Like, what's with this whole, I thought they were an honorable man and an honorable woman. It looks like Ruth's going down to seduce Boaz and uncover his feet. Like, what's up with that? It is strange to us, but I also think it was a little bit strange for the original hearers of this story. Because I think it's meant to get us to ask these questions, what is happening? But it's important that we do understand what's happening, because I think this reveals something about Naomi's hope. Now again, Naomi was concerned about providing a future for her daughter-in-law because being a widow was a really hard life. We've talked about this before. There weren't a whole lot of social safety nets in ancient Israel. This was taking place during a time in Israel's history called the time of the Judges. And it was just a rough place to live. It was a rough place to be a person, let alone a widow who really didn't have any sort of support for herself. And so Naomi is concerned about her daughter-in-law and sees a possible path forward. And so her plan, this sort of devious plan or clever plan, is she says, listen, tonight is the night where Boaz, who is a farmer, is going to take his barley out to the threshing floor. Now, just a little bit of farmer information for you. In that day, and this is still true in some parts of the world today, if you're harvesting wheat or barley, what you would do is you would take everything that you've gleaned and you would take it out at the end of the harvest season to the threshing floor. And the threshing floor was this big, flat area. Sometimes it was on a hill, sometimes it was in a valley. The important thing is it was a place where the wind would blow through. So you have a nice, gentle breeze. And what they would do is the owner and the other farmers or helping hands would come together and they would get all this wheat or this barley. And you can, if you look it up on YouTube, you can still see this being done today. They would grab these shovels or pitchfork, and the idea is that you're throwing this wheat or barley into the air, and the breeze carries away the chaff, the useless parts of the wheat or barley, and then the seeds fall down to the ground. And so all day, for hours, you're just throwing things up in the air. The wind is blowing away the chaff, and the seeds, which you're going to use and eat and bake and all that stuff, fall down to the ground. And this was sort of a celebratory time because all the work that went into farming finally paid off. Like you got to see what you actually reaped. You got to see how much was actually there. And so this was a time where they would basically throw a party. And that's what Naomi's saying. She says, I know Boaz is going to throw a little party. He's going to eat and drink. Now the word she uses there isn't that Boaz is going to get drunk or anything like that, but they're basically going to throw a little party, a little celebration, so he's going to be in good spirits. And so she says, all right, so he's going to be in a good mood, right? It's like if you're going to go ask your spouse, hey, can I make this big purchase? You wait until they're in a good mood. If you're newly wedded, if you're newly married, you will learn that. You will learn there are times to ask for favors and times not to ask for favors. This was a time where Naomi said, this is the greatest time to ask Boaz a very important question. So she says, go down there. Now, this is a little bit of an ambiguous situation because it wasn't uncommon during that time for prostitutes to go out to the threshing floor as well. It'd be a time where they could earn money, where they could receive food. And so by Naomi going out uninvited, it was suggestive. Now, it wasn't necessarily the case that's what she was doing. She could have been going to visit Boaz or anybody else. But it also could have been seen as something more, something different. But clearly from Naomi's instructions, she was not going out to seduce Boaz. She was going for different means. And so she was tasked to go out there and she said, wait till Boaz falls asleep. Because also at that time, you would have thieves who would come and they'd try to steal the food, right? Like you've got all this free seed and barley out there that's already been threshed. Well, why not take it? So the farmers would sort of camp out right around the pile of seeds that they had. So she says, all right, go out. And under cover of darkness, I want you to go, and I want you to uncover his feet, right? Now, that's really, in part, where we get to the weird part of the story. Like, did she like feet or something? My wife does not like feet, so my wife cannot relate to that. She says, if we're sitting on the couch and my feet are out, she's like, let me just scoot down a little bit more. But what was going on with this? And more importantly, what does this have to do with hope? We see in our English dictionary, the word for hope usually means a wish, right? I hope something will happen. When Fred went out to gamble his money away, he hoped, he had a wish that he would receive 10 times what he gambled. Hope in our modern sense is anything but certain. But hope in the Bible is very, very different. When the Bible speaks about hope, there is a certainty to it. And so what I would say is this is what hope in the Bible is. Biblical hope is confidence. It is confidence that at the end of the day, God will come through. There is a certainty to it. It is not a gamble. Now, that does not mean that Christians who have hope are certain that God will make all their plans succeed. No, that's not true. Plenty of Christians start businesses that fail or try things that fail. That is not the point. But biblical hope is a certainty, knowing that at the end of the day, God will come through. And we talked about this last week when we talked about the providence of God, how God is always working. And so the hope of the Christian is in that fact that God is going to come through even when it doesn't look that way, even when it doesn't feel that way, that God is going to come through. And so for Naomi, this was big, and you see this hope come alive because she, in chapter 3, is a very different person than she was in chapter 1. Do you remember in chapter 1 when she comes home after the death of her husband, the death of her sons, and the people of Bethlehem who know her say, oh, look, there's Naomi, which means pleasant. And she says, don't call me Naomi, but call me what? Call me Mara, which means bitter, for the Almighty has turned his hand against me. But now we see there's a glimmer of hope. And this is the truth. This is what hope does for us in a sense. If hope is that confidence in God, one of the things that despair does is despair robs us of our dreams. It makes us feel like, what's the point in even trying? It makes us feel, why go on? Why do anything? Why risk anything? Because there's no point. Or on the other hand, despair and hopelessness make us feel like we need to do underhanded things to get ahead. Like it's a dog-eat-dog world, right? So why don't I just act like everybody else? But the Christian has a different starting point. The Christian has a confidence. They have a confidence that at the end of the day, God is going to come through. And so that means that inspires us to try things, to dream, to be bold, because we know that God is for us. And again, that doesn't mean that all of our plans are going to come through, but there's a big difference in trying something, knowing that at the end of the day, God is going to come through in the way that he wants, and his will is good, pleasing, and perfect. There's a difference in going out on a venture, trusting that to God, versus going through sort of like Fred did and said, man, I really hope this works out. We're literally going to gamble $5,000 away. Because believe it or not, gambling is a terrible way to make money. Casinos know that. You're going to lose more often than you win, but it's these stories like that stories of Fred where they do win a lot that inspires people, but it's a trap. It's a trap. And that is very different than biblical hope. Biblical hope is a confidence that God is going to come through. The psalmist says this in Psalm 130. He says, I wait for the Lord. My soul waits. And in his word, I hope. So hope is confidence that God will come through. But what does hope do? Now, hope is not just a feeling, right? Hope does make us feel something. Hope does make us feel good or inspire us. But it wasn't just a feeling that led Naomi to concoct this plan with Ruth. As I said, this was a daring plan, because not only could Ruth have been apprehended or even taken advantage of as a supposed prostitute, but what if Boaz had have misinterpreted Ruth's advances? Now, we know that Boaz was an honorable man. We see that again and again. So likely, Boaz probably wouldn't have taken Ruth up on her supposed sexual advance. He probably would say, you're not the woman I thought you were. Get out of here. But he didn't. Again, it's important to understand that this was never Naomi's intention as well. Naomi does say things like, hey, bathe, get clean, get dressed. That wasn't a way of it wasn't a call to put on a seductive outfit or anything like that. Believe it or not, people in the ancient world probably bathed once a week, maybe once every other week, very different from today. And so what Naomi was really telling Ruth to do was she was saying, move beyond your time of mourning. Up until this point, Ruth very likely had worn a garment that was for mourning. It was to mourn the loss of her husband. But Naomi said, okay, we've done that. Now we need to look forward. So bathe yourself, clean yourself up, and get dressed. Now the NIV translates it as put on your best dress. It probably isn't a fancy dress. It's probably more likely a traveler's garment. But basically she's saying, get dressed like you're going to work. Like, because you've got a plan. You've got a purpose. And so then she gets, and again, we get to that point where she uncovers Boaz's feet. Now let's read sort of what happens in verse 7, 8, and 9. So the author of Ruth says, well, after Boaz ate and drank, so this is the unfolding of the plan. After Boaz ate, drank, and was in good spirits, he went to lie down at the end of the pile of barley, again, as a way to guard it. And she, Ruth, came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. Well, at midnight, Boaz was startled, probably because his feet were cold. And he turned over, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. So he asked, who are you? I am Ruth, your servant, she replied. Take me under your wing, for you are a family redeemer. Well, essentially what's happening here is Ruth is acting out a very symbolic marriage proposal, believe it or not. See, the words that she uses for take me under your wing, that was a common way of asking somebody to marry you. It was to say, come under my protection. And if you don't believe that, look at the way that God speaks to the nation of Israel, who is his bride. And then in the New Testament, the church is his bride. God tells the nation of Israel to come and let me take you under my wing. When Jesus comes and he looks over Jerusalem, he says, how I long to take you under my wing, like a hen calls for her chicks. He says, how I long to do that with you, Jerusalem, but you would not let me. It is a sign of love. It is a sign of protection. And so often in ancient Israel, husbands would do that, or men would do that as they propose to their wives. Let me take you under my wing. But here we have something interesting happen. First, we have Naomi, a woman proposing to a man, which was unusual then. But the other thing is Naomi uses a word for wing, which could also be translated blanket. And so in some of your translations, it might read, spread the corner of your garment over me. The word could mean either or. And so it was really this clever way, I think, a clever play on words where Naomi was saying, take me under your wing, but also take me under your blanket to keep me warm. In other words, she's saying, will you protect me from the cold now? And will you protect me for all of our days to come? Will you protect me now from the cold? You woke up because it was cold. I don't have a blanket. Will you protect me now from the cold, but will you protect me for every day to come as we come together as a family? Again, there was a boldness there. And there's something beautiful about that. Again, that Ruth is not looking for a one-night stand. She is looking for a lifelong partner. And if any of you are out there and you're saying, man, one day I hope the Lord blesses me with a spouse, I want to encourage you to do the same. Don't look for a one-night stand because it doesn't go very far. In fact, it usually causes more problems than it's worth. But look for someone who is going to protect you, who is going to love you, who is going to care for you. I didn't marry my wife just because she was beautiful. She's the most beautiful woman on the earth to me, but I married her because of who she is and because of her character. And so as you look for someone, look for that in another person. Now, what does all this reveal, though, about hope? Again, we're talking about hope. We talked about how hope is biblical confidence. It's confidence that at the end of the day, God will come through. But what does hope do for us? Well, hope led Naomi in this radical plan to try to get Ruth and Boaz together, to try to get them hitched. And I think it teaches us this, that hope inspires us to take action. What does hope do? It inspires us to do something. Now, again, as I said, it gives us the confidence to dream, to try things, to be bold. And as a really very real world example, think about the way that we started this church a few years ago. When we planted this church, we had a small team of people who were coming together, and we were dreaming about what God may want to do in Garner. And for this team, there was a hope, there was a confident expectation that God was going to do something. Now, of course, God had every right to say, no, maybe this won't work out. Maybe the people won't come together. Maybe there's going to be other things that happen. That happens all the time for people who try to plant churches. But it was the confidence that we believed God was going to do something that gave us the boldness to step out in faith. And notice I say we, because it wasn't just me. It's not I had the boldness. No, we had an incredible, and still have, but we had an incredible group of people who came together to do something crazy like start a church, because that is not an ordinary thing to do. But again, my point is not to say, well, be like us or look at us, but it's to say we did that. We stepped out in faith because we had the confidence that God was going to come through. That hope inspired us to act. And in the same sort of way, it is the confidence in God that allows people to walk into the unknown. It inspires or leads Christians to do things like foster children, to start businesses, and to go on mission trips, which, by the way, we have people in this room who have done those things. It's that hope that God is going to do something. Again, maybe in line with our plans, but maybe not. But at the end of the day, God is going to do something. And so I want to encourage you that as you contemplate and you think about the next steps in your life, whatever that might be, maybe it's retirement, maybe it's what college you'll go to, or what job to take, or whatever it might be, or whether or not to have kids, I want to encourage you to look at those seasons of your life with hope. If you don't feel that hope, ask yourself, am I trusting God with my future? Because it's possible that you may not feel the hope. Hope is more than a feeling, but it's possible you may not feel that hope because perhaps maybe you've trusted more in yourself and your own ingenuity than you have in the goodness of God and in the wisdom of God and in the providence of God. So let that hope encourage you to take risks, to do something for the Lord. Ask yourself, how's God situated me to serve him? I believe that often the greatest satisfaction we experience in life often comes when we unite our gifts with the heart of God and when we use our time, talents, and treasures to honor him. And sometimes that's right where we're comfortable, but oftentimes it's not. For some of the people on the stage, as they sing and they play instruments, it's very comfortable for them, but for some of them it is not. But they do it because they say, Lord, I know that you have gifted me. And I want to use this for your good pleasure. Same with serving in kids. Same with cafe or whatever other position it is. We don't serve because it's comfortable, but we do it to please the Lord. And so I want to encourage you to do the same. Now, how does Boaz respond to this? Well, verse 10 and 11, Boaz thankfully responds very positively. He says to Ruth, the Lord bless you, my daughter. He replied, this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. In every sense of the word, this proposal should not have happened. Not only, again, was it unusual to have a young woman a woman proposing to a man, but a young woman at that proposing to an older man. Also, it was a foreigner proposing to an Israelite. A poor person proposing to a wealthy person. All of it was unusual. It was strange. It was weird, but yet because of her character and because of her devotion to her mother-in-law, Boaz knew that she was someone special. I said this last week, but I think it's worth repeating that the story of Ruth, one of the things it teaches us is it teaches us that character matters. Your character counts. You see, often it's my belief that ultimately character will take you further in life than talent will. Talent might get you somewhere, but character will keep you there. Too many people build their success solely on their talent. And at some point, it all comes crumbling down. I think you see this probably most predominantly in ministry, where a really gifted speaker or a really gifted director or a really gifted worship leader or whatever role they're in, they're there sometimes not because of their character, but because of their talent. And their talent takes them beyond their character, and that's when things come crumbling down. That's when affairs happen. That's where shady business practices happen. And the same is true, by the way, outside of the church. And so I want to encourage you, as we've done pretty much every week, and as we look at the story, to ask God to build in you a character that is worthy of the gospel. Ask God to build in you a heart of character, because it is your character, or a character is one of the things that will keep your marriage together. Character is one of the things that will help you to raise strong children. Character is one of the things that will help you to build a strong business. Wherever you are, your character matters. In Ruth's case, it was her character that spoke to Boaz and told him that, wow, this is a woman who is worth marrying. I can't let this one get away. I believe it can do the same in you, regardless of whether you're about to propose to somebody or you're starting a business or whatever it may be. Let your character speak louder than your skills and your talents. So as we wrap up, so we've talked about hope, and we've said that hope is a confidence that at the end of the day, God is going to come through. And one of the things hope does is hope inspires us to take action, to take risks, to be bold, to dream. And so I just want to close with one more thought. And I say again, at this point in the story, one of the things we see is that the story is about, it looks like it's going to have a happy ending. And we know ultimately it does, but there's a wrench in the plan. This is in every movie, especially if things seem to come together halfway through, you know it's not going to stay like that. There's going to be a misunderstanding. There's going to be something that is going to cause you to doubt, is it going to be a happy ending? And the same is true in Ruth. Look one more time. Look at what Boaz says in verse 12. He says, yes. Speaking of Ruth, yes, it is true that I am your family redeemer. But there is a redeemer closer than I am. There is another man closer than I am. So stay here for tonight. And in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, that's good. Let him redeem you. But if he doesn't want to redeem you, as the Lord lives, I will. Now again, this is a strange custom to us, but in that culture, there was a responsibility that if a widow was left without an heir, that it was the responsibility of a family member to take that person under their wing, to marry them, to provide for them, provide for the widow, and also provide an offspring, an heir who would inherit the property and continue that family line. And so again, it's strange to us, but that was a big deal in that culture, and that was part of that security it provided. And it was the right of the nearest relative. So at this point, we see this beautiful love story unfolding between Ruth and Boaz, and it seems so sweet and it seems so pure, but suddenly Boaz says, listen, legally, I can't say yes to you yet. There is another who is closer than I, and we must tell him before I can accept this. But he does say something important. He says, one way or another, Ruth, you will be redeemed. As surely as the Lord lives, if this other man will not take you, I will. It's a promise. And this promise of Boaz to Ruth is a reflection of God's promise to us. See, it is a promise that God will not leave us out in the cold. That God wants to take us under his wing, that he holds out redemption to us. And he says, come, take refuge under my mighty wings. As the psalmist says, take refuge under the shadow of my wings. And so it is not redemption that is uncertain. That's where our hope comes from, that God's promises are true and they're sure. And that his redemption is not something we take a gamble on, but we know it is there if we are willing. See, hope, I believe, hope is only as good as the thing that you hope in. As I said, Fred Smith put his hope in a few hands of blackjack, and even he would tell you it's not a good idea. It's not a very good thing to put your hope in. But again and again, Scripture tells us to put our hope in God, put your confidence in God. Again, the psalmist said, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. In today's language, you might say something like this. You might say, some trust in politicians. Some trust in the economy. Some trust in their skills. Some trust in their savings. Some trust in technology. And some trust in their plans. But what? But we will trust in the name of the Lord our God. We will put our hope in him. And that foundation will be the foundation from which we live and act and explore the rest of our lives. So I want to encourage you, if you've never made that decision today, you can do that. That's what repentance and baptism means. It's saying, I'm not going to seek hope in these other things, but Lord, I'm going to seek hope in you, and I'm going to surrender my life, and I'm going to chase after you because you are the most important thing. And we will be better husbands, and we will be better wives, and we will be better bosses and employees and students when we love him most. So if you haven't made that decision, I want to encourage you to pray about that. Come back and see me, see one of our elders. We'd love to talk with you about that. Will you pray with me? Lord Jesus, we thank you for offering and extending to us a guarantee of redemption if we will but come to you. God, that you will provide for us, that we will not be left out in the cold, that we will not be left to guess or wonder or wander out in the night, but you have invited us to come near to you. Father, may we say yes to you, and as we live in that security, Lord, may you work in every single one of us. May you work in every single one of our hearts, building us up and making us men and women of godly character, men and women who reflect your nature. May we not give in to the pressures of this world. May we not give in to the pressures of our peers, of our classmates, of our colleagues, or whoever it may be. But Lord, may we stand firm on the firm foundation that is you, Jesus Christ, and your gospel. In Jesus' name, we pray these things. Amen.